Can I know I've already asked for you to move once already, but can I get you to come a little bit closer? I promise Ash doesn't bite, and it's a whole lot more intimate. We've got a small group, but you can learn a lot. I'm really pleased this afternoon to be introducing you to Ash Roy. Ash is founder of Productive Insights, and he's a podcast and online coach with over 175 podcasts. Ash really believes in creating very actionable content, and he very occasionally speaks on stage, and he's spoken at Super Fast Business Live, Macquarie Bank, IBM. His membership program called Get Me to Done helps business owners build their online businesses using content strategies like podcasting, blogging and marketing automation. So can I ask you, there's only a few of us, but a big loud round of applause for Ash.
Thank you very much. You guys can all hear me okay? Now, I'm actually very impressed with this turnout because I'm up against a titan, James Schramko, in the other room, and I was expecting one person here, and that was my mum. So I'm very grateful for your presence, and I really want to deliver some exceptional value to you today. That's my mission. What I ask from you is to help me, because I'm a bit nervous. So if you can help me by just being a bit participative, maybe stick up your hand if I ask questions and just be a bit responsive, that'll be great. The more you put in, the more you'll get out of it. And I'll do the asking of the questions for the first, say, 20, 25 minutes. And then at the end, I'll have you ask the questions in the Q&A session, and we'll do a little mini workshop as well. So let's talk about what we're going to have happen in this next 45 minutes. Do I still have 45 minutes? Yeah, cool. So what we're going to talk about is answer the question, is podcasting easy to monetize? What sort of return on investment can you expect to get on podcasting? We're going to look at a case study of one of my clients and what sort of ROI she got. We're going to talk about how to use podcasting to build your authority and become an influencer in your niche through influencer marketing. And then finally, we are going to actually get you started on your podcast launch here in this room today. So can I get a show of hands just to see who's excited about this? Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Awesome. Well, first we're going to have a look at just get a bit of a feel for the audience. I've been asking around before the session. Can I get a show of hands? Do you listen to a podcast currently? Okay, that's almost the entire room. Awesome. Do you host a podcast currently? One person, two, three. Three people. Awesome. Welcome to the club. Have you thought of using podcasting for authority building or lead generation or influencer marketing? Show of hands. Okay, good. Awesome. So that's about a third of the room. Awesome. So I think I have a lot of value to offer to you, even if you are currently using podcasting for any of those three things. So just quickly, let's look at a couple of stats. I want to bring your attention. This is from podcastanalytics.com, nothing to do with my website, but they recently published stats which say that podcast listeners are loyal, affluent, and educated. We'll talk about this a little bit more soon, and I'll explain why I think that is true. And then the other statistic I want to bring to your attention is this thing on the bottom, which is also very important. Keep that in mind. 80% of listeners of podcasts are listening to almost all of each episode. That is insane compared to, say, video consumption or written blog content consumption. By the way, don't feel like you need to take notes. I will give you access to all the slides. I will be sharing my contact details with you later on in this presentation in a sheet, and you can SMS me and I'll send them to you. So just sit back and enjoy the show, as the Beatles said. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out is podcasting has been growing consistently, and if you look at 2018 to 2019, it's been a bit of a jump. It seems to be growing logarithmically, and we'll also look at why that is happening. So now let's look at this case study and answer the question, is podcasting monetizable? Well, meet Amanda Farmer. Amanda Farmer is the founder of Lawyers Chambers, which is a successful Sydney law firm. And she wanted to address two key challenges in her business, which was a strata law practice. And that was, she wanted to attract high quality clients who were going to help her grow her business profitably while working less. She also wanted to establish herself quickly as an authority in her niche. So how did we solve the problem? We went about these following steps, which we'll be going through later on today. We created a detailed listener avatar. We created a content strategy that solved her audience's problem, which we learnt from the problem which we understood from having seen her audience avatar, from having done that research. We recorded and edited the first 3 episodes. We created podcast standard operating procedures and frameworks, which you will see are very important when it comes to consistent production of good quality content. We then launched into iTunes in March 2016, and we published consistently from then on using the SOPs, or standard operating procedures and frameworks, which we'll be talking about soon. So the results, 6 weeks in, Amanda was contacted by a client, or a prospective client at the time, who had been listening to a podcast, and this person said, I really like your content. I'd like to find out how to work with you, and it led to a conversation, which then led to a very lucrative deal for both parties. Amanda offered great value, and this person got a lot of value out of the services that she offered because he understood her services well before he even signed up, thanks to a podcast. She had quickly positioned herself as an influencer in a niche. She had differentiated herself because no other strata lawyers at the time that we were aware of were doing a podcast. And through her podcast, because she got a very quick growth in her listenership, partly because she was one of the only people podcasting at the time, she was helping hundreds of people, so that satisfied her mission. She achieved an ROI of 100%, 6 weeks. Now, I will say that this is not very common, but it was an awesome result. 20 months in, Amanda had been featured on Sky News. She was invited to speak at fairly major events in her niche. In fact, she just told me last week she was speaking, or maybe this week, she was speaking in the Gold Coast. She's from Sydney. She had been positioned as a leading expert in her niche because she had featured some of the leading authorities in strata law, people who had been doing it for like 40 years, and they wanted to be guests on her show, and now she had a queue of people wanting to be guests on her show. And she was very well differentiated, not just in her clients' minds, but also in the minds of the media and all the other relatively important channels that she wanted to tap into to put her firm, to increase the profile of her firm. Now, I'm not going to stand here and lie to you. Podcasting is not easy. It takes work. It's not unicorns and rainbows. You're not going to get a result overnight. Sometimes you could be lucky, but generally it's a case of you get out of it what you put into it. But if you follow the right structures, the right frameworks, and you have somebody help you to do it, and I highly recommend getting someone to help you, you will be able to get through that difficult part in the trenches faster. So I already explained that it requires consistency and focus, and we'll be talking about consistency versus frequency of episodes a little bit later on. So let's just quickly look at 9 of the key benefits I've outlined of podcasting. Now, obviously, these are not exhaustive, but it's one of the fastest growing mediums right now. I think it might be the fastest. It's faster than video and blogging as far as I'm aware. It doesn't require a screen. Now, this has created a very interesting dynamic. A lot of very affluent professionals and entrepreneurs tend to be time poor. There's a correlation. And so these entrepreneurs and professionals are trying to self-educate off screen. They see the screen as for multiple reasons. One is they see the screen as a source of overwhelm, a source of stress, because a lot of their workload comes from screen-based interactions. But they're also choosing to consume content while they're driving, while they're at the gym, while they're falling asleep, while they're washing dishes. So they tend to consume content in their dead time, and I believe that is one of the reasons you're seeing that 80% of people completing their podcast episodes, as in listening to them. Massive engagement. Leading on to that, it's a very intimate medium. John Lee Dumas was a guest on my podcast. He's a founder of Entrepreneur on Fire, was featured in Time magazine. He produces a podcast every day, and I think he's a bit of a unicorn that way. I don't recommend producing one every day. But it is a very intimate medium, and his view is that we tend to connect with the voice before we are born, when we are in our mother's tummies. I think that it's a very intimate medium because we tend to listen to podcasts either with headphones or while we're driving in the car, and we tend to listen on our own. I know if I try and turn on a podcast related to business while I'm in the car, my wife will say, turn that thing off, because she's not interested in business at all. She's an obstetrician, and business bores her to death. So I think that is the experience for most other people. Their partners tend not to really want to be subject to the same thing, although I'm sure there are exceptions. So people tend to consume podcasts very much alone, and so they develop this very personal relationship. And I've lost count of the number of times people have come up to me and said, hey, it's so nice to see you after all this time, and then they realize, and I realize, that we haven't actually met before. And it's always quite awkward because I'm trying to place them and I'm feeling like a bit weird because I can't remember where I met this person. But it's created that level of, that strength of connection. Rand Fishkin, who's been on my podcast on 3 different occasions, with whom I've developed a pretty good relationship, he said something very interesting. Rand Fishkin is the founder of Moz.com, which is an SEO-based website. And he said mobile growth, he does a lot of studies around traffic and things. He said mobile consumption is growing, but not at the expense of desktop. That means mobile is growing independently of desktop consumption. People are consuming mobile content outside of their normal work hours or office hours. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it's happening. And so mobile consumption is really rising, and podcasting, being predominantly a mobile-based medium, is rising with the tide. It's like having your own radio station at a fraction of the cost. Radio has influenced our culture for decades, and I think podcasting is picking up where radio left off. Apple's CarPlay is rolling off production lines. It's getting baked into cars. It's baked into the machinery. Listening to podcasts appears to be becoming more and more an integral part of the commute. If you're in a car, or even if you're on a bus or a train, you tend to pop into your ears. Excuse me. And with CarPlay, it's an off-screen experience, right? You can just say, hey, I won't say the word because people's phones will go off, but hey, SIRI, or whatever, if you're listening on Spotify, hey, whatever, play the Productive Insights podcast, and it starts playing it. So it's massively easy to access content while you're on the go, and the friction to access is dramatically reduced. With voice search and things that are happening right now in the background, artificial intelligence and so on, I think this is going to go next level soon. Podcast is very easy to leverage, assuming your podcast is an audio-based podcast, which most podcasts are. There are some video ones, but audio-based content is very easy to produce. It takes me about 30 to 35 minutes to produce a 30-minute piece of content, provided, and I recommend this, you outsource the editing and the pre- and post-production, which is also something I teach my clients with whom I do podcast launches. The best part of it, what makes it so easy to repurpose, so it's easy to produce and to repurpose. What makes it so easy to repurpose is the fact that you can just get it transcribed using rev.com or temi.com, and provided you know how to write good quality headlines and subheads, which I happen to know because I'm a trained writer. If you don't have training in writing headlines and so on, then try and get some skills in that area. But if you can write good quality headlines and subheads, you can turn it into a very compelling SEO-based piece of content that complements your audio content. Historically, you were able to repurpose your audio into YouTube by having an image and then, these wavy kind of lines that would come on the videos. And I do have quite a few of those on my YouTube channel, but my recent research tells me that is not the best practice, so I don't recommend that anymore. Podcasting builds massive authority for all the reasons mentioned, all the previous 8 reasons, particularly the fact that it's a very intimate medium. You don't require a screen. Mobile content consumption is growing, and people are completing the content a lot more than they are on other platforms. And then finally, it's a great way to develop deep and meaningful relationships with influencers, provided you can bring some value to the conversation. And this is where having a good content creation framework is very important. We'll be talking about that later. So, how do you use podcasting for authority building, influencer marketing, and lead generation? What are the actual steps you can take? Well, when you reach out to an influencer, it's very important not to reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to be on a podcast? Well, they'll probably say no. What you want to do is understand what their mission is, connect with the mission behind their business, follow them on Twitter, follow them on LinkedIn. Don't do it creepily, but follow them on Twitter and LinkedIn, and really get an understanding of what sorts of things they're posting and connect with those things. Embellish what they're saying with thoughtful comments. Avoid the yeah, me too type comments. That's not going to work. But really try and connect with their mission. Another great way to connect with their mission is to buy their products, use their products, get a result, because that is obviously deeply aligned with their mission. They've created the products because they feel passionately about them. And then show them, say, hey, this is the result I got from what you did. I liked what you did. So be very clear and specific about what you're getting from having engaged with their content, whether it's paid or free content, and you're likely to build a relationship over time. These are some of the guests I've had the honor of featuring on my podcast. There's 180 episodes. Obviously, I can't have all of them on there. But the first 2, I think, are particularly awesome. Amy Porterfield produces insanely awesome content, and James Schramko was instrumental in me, getting my podcast launched. So I highly recommend reaching out to these influencers, getting results from their content, and then sharing that with them. That really will help you to develop a good relationship. But don't expect it to happen overnight. Podcast guesting. That's becoming a big thing these days. How do you reach out to people to be a guest on their podcast? Well, it's fairly similar to the influencer approach in that you get an understanding of what the host you're approaching is trying to do with his or her podcast. You understand what his or her mission is. You try and connect with that mission. You, most importantly, get a deep understanding of their audience, and you can do this by reading blog posts or comments on their website or listening to their podcasts and maybe following them on Twitter and LinkedIn. And then approach them with a good quality pitch. I did this with the founder of tinybuddha.com. Anyone here heard of Tiny Buddha, the website? Yeah. It gets about 4 million views a month. And I approached Laurie Deschênes, the founder, after having done a lot of research on the most popular blogs on her site, and I screenshotted comments and said, you know what, this comment tells me that this is what was missing from this popular blog post of yours. Would you like me to write you a blog post? And because I'm a trained writer, I was able to comfortably do that. But then she said to me, you can write anytime you want. Just let me know when you want to write and you can write. So my point is you can do that with podcasting too. But it all starts with giving value. You've got to give insane value because there's so much noise out there. And I've found that a lot of marketers with incredibly slick funnels, not always, but often, tend to have weak products. You need to have both. You need to have an insanely good funnel and content, onboarding content, but you need to create products that really deliver a result. Now, mind you, just a caveat there are some customers or clients who will not get results because they just don't take action, and that is not something that can be controlled. But provided you're working with people who take action, you really should be seeing them get results. They should be getting results. How does podcasting help the sales conversation? Well, literally, it helps the sales conversation. But has anyone here heard about ZMOTs? Google did this study called Zero Moments of Truth. Yeah, we got someone back in the room there. So basically, in marketing circles, the first moment of truth was believed to be the first time you came in contact with a product or a brand. And then what happened after Google came along was people started doing searches. So, if you want to buy a pair of shoes 20 years ago, you'd walk into a store and you'd talk to the salesperson, and if they didn't seem too sleazy and douchey, you'd buy the pair of shoes from them, even if they charged a couple of dollars more than the person next door. But now, people are going on Google and searching. And often, the selling company is discovering the customer at the point of purchase when it's too late to market to them. And so Google came up with this thing called Zero Moments of Truth, where the customer's first connecting with a brand or a product online. And Google said you had to have something like, 7 ZMOTs or something. This was like 15 years ago or something like that, that led to a purchase decision. Now it's much more. But with a podcast, because you've got so much deeper and intimate connection happening with your audience or your prospective buyers, the conversion rates are higher provided you are creating good quality content. So in my view, it's not about downloads. People get obsessed with downloads. I don't really care about download numbers. I don't care about massive email lists. I don't care about massive amounts of traffic, because give me 10 people coming to my website, 8 of which become loyal customers. I'll take that over 20 million people on my website with no one converting any day. They're probably all bots. But, not literally, but you get where I'm going with this. So Chris Garrett, who until recently, and maybe still does, taught at a university in Canada. He taught content marketing. He was a guest on my show on episode 6. And he said it beautifully. He said, the conversation between a buyer and a seller is already happening out there right now, through Google, through social media, through all these other channels. And it's happening with or without you. The only question is, are you going to be part of that purchase, that part of that conversation that leads to a purchase decision? By the way, I forgot to mention that the conversation with John Lee Dumas and with Rand Fishkin are all on my website. The one with John Lee Dumas was episode 39, and the one with Rand was episode 38. But if you just go to productiveinsights.com and use the search bar, you can bring up all these people's names, and you can check out their content. Okay, let's talk hardware and software. So what hardware and software do you need? Well, there's tons of hardware and software out there. And I'm not going to bore you with all the million options, but these are some useful options. I use the Rode Podcaster mic, which is on the bottom right of the screen. I've heard good things about the Pod mic, which is on the top right of the screen. I'm biased towards Rodes because they're Australian made and they're world class, and I'm very proud of them. So I prefer to buy Rodes, but there are other devices, other microphones as well. You can get Heil microphones. I think Pat Flynn talked about Audio Technica, but an earlier version. You can use a Rode Lav mic for mobile based content. And in fact, I just did a Facebook Live with Molly Pittman using one of these Lav mics. I'm hooked up to one right now. And we actually had one for each of us, and it was pretty cool. It creates good quality audio. Audio is very important, quality audio. And the last thing I want to talk about is the thing on the bottom left, which is the Rodecaster Pro. I haven't used it yet, but it'll set you back about $850, and it allows you to mix in sounds and jingles and stuff. That's probably if you're more of an advanced podcaster. By the way, the Rode mic will set you back about $150, I believe. And you can just go to rode.com, rode.com, and you should be able to get yourself one. The Audio Technica is a bit cheaper, but I don't know exactly how much. Now this is the thing on the left is a boom arm, and it basically, if you look at the bottom of that thing, it's a clamp that clamps to your desk. And the boom arm allows you to springy. It sort of allows you to suspend your mic above your desk, and it's pretty cool. You can move it out of the way, and it's fun. And then the thing on the right, sort of, if you imagine it turning this way and hooking it at the boom arm, it basically is what is called a shock mount. And because the mic tends to be sort of long, it stops it from wobbling too much, and if you accidentally knock it, it doesn't knock it out of its socket. So I use those two things to suspend the mic there when I do my podcast episodes. What sort of software do you need? Again, tons of options. I just keep things really simple. You can use Skype or Zoom. I've actually found Skype seems to have better quality video, or so my team tells me, than Zoom. So I'm a bit biased towards Skype. In terms of editing, I rarely do editing. I have my team, we offer an editing service, so my team does all my editing like I'm a client. But you can do it on ScreenFlow if you have a Mac, Camtasia if you have a PC. And Auphonic is a nice to have. It allows you to remove all the background noise and level this audio and stuff like that. If this intimidates you, don't worry. You can ask me questions afterwards. I'm available for today, for tomorrow. I'm even here for the third day. If any of you are around, you will have my number. You can SMS me. I'll send you the slides, so all good. All right, so the four biggest mistakes people tend to make when it comes to podcasting. How are we going for time, Luke? 20 left? Okay. So the four most common mistakes people make when it comes to podcasting. They don't make a start. We're going to address that today, here. The second mistake, if you just want to start handing out those slides now, that'd be great. The second mistake is people try to do it all themselves. Podcasting is really, really fiddly. A lot of the stuff you do around your launch is stuff that you won't ever do again. So it makes sense to outsource it to somebody who does it for a living. Probably keep your costs down. Now, of course, that's assuming that you can invest in a podcast launch. But if you can't, at least get yourself a mentor. Because a mentor has been down this path before. They know what you don't know. And they will be able to help you negotiate a pretty rocky terrain and avoid a lot of the pitfalls. And the last mistake, this is after people have launched, is inconsistent content creation. Now, there's a difference between consistency and frequency. You can produce content consistently once a month, which is what I'm doing at the moment. You can produce content inconsistently once a day, because if you do 5 episodes in 5 days and then nothing for 3 months, and then 2 episodes over 3 weeks, and then nothing for 2 months, and then another 6 episodes in 6 days, it's going to confuse your audience. So my recommendation is, when you first launch your podcast, you're probably pretty pumped about it. It's pretty exciting. Record a bunch of episodes, but put them in a bank and drip them out at a frequency that you feel confident you can consistently produce or consistently honor over a period of, say, a year or 2. It is okay to change frequency from time to time. I'm not saying don't ever change. I started off doing weekly, and then I went to fortnightly, now monthly. I might increase the frequency, but just think about your listener. It's all about the audience. How are they going to experience it? So don't chop and change too much, that's all. Okay, who's ready to kick off their podcast launch right here, right now? Awesome. Okay, well, on your desks, you should now have a sheet with 2 sides to it. One has got 11 steps, and it's an 11-step podcast launch plan. And the other side has got 4 steps on it, and it's got some blank bits. So we are going to go through the entire 11 steps now, but we're going to do the first 4 steps together. You probably won't finish all the 4 steps, but the objective here is to make a start. I remember talking to Ryan Dice in episode 170 on my podcast, and he mentioned a book called Ready, Fire, Aim. Anyone heard of that book? Okay. I haven't read the book. I plan to. But the name says it all. You are often ready before you think you're ready. So my advice is, make a start. Sonia Simone said that to me once. One of the biggest challenges she's found with writing is just making a start. So let's make a start together here, now. So you can say to yourself that I have started my podcasting journey. And at least then you know that's one thing you've done. And hopefully, within the next few weeks or months, you will have a podcast if that's what you want. Are we ready to do this? Okay. Step 1. It all comes back to your listener. Identify your listener and what problem you will solve for them. So I want you to fill in that first blank space thingy. Just fill in the details, whatever you can think of, your listener's age, their gender, what sort of work you think they do. Even if all of this is not explained there, I'm just going to call a few things out. And I just want you to just scribble some notes. The act of writing itself will kick off a certain creative process. So let's think about it. Who's your listener? Who's your ideal listener? Now, you may not even have decided what you're going to podcast about. If that's the case, then think about who's your ideal client. Who do you help right now? Or who do you want to help? So just write down, how old are they? Do they have kids? Do they have a family? How long do you think they commute? Of course, you're not going to know exactly how long, but do you reckon they're commuting like 15 minutes a day, maybe half an hour a day? Are they really busy and stressed out? Or are they like pretty laid back? And we'll see in a minute. That will tell us how long our episode should be, because if they're really busy and stressed out and don't have a lot of time, then you need to make your content punchy and deliver the information quickly. If they're really laid back and they have more time on their hands, maybe you want to go deeper into the content, provide context, provide examples, provide case studies. Maybe you want to do a bit of both. What style do you go for? Do you go for interview-based podcasts or solo episodes? There's no right answer to this. I do both. But again, think of what would serve your audience best, because that's what we're really here to do. We're here to serve, and sure, we want to make a living out of it, but we're here to make an impact. We're here to deliver results. We're here to deliver value. Decide on a title for your show. So there's a couple of ways to go about creating a title. If you already have brand equity in your business, which I did, I went with my business name for the title for my show. So my business is called productiveinsights.com, and I went with the Productive Insights podcast. You can also go with a different approach, which is what we did for Amanda Farmer. Remember, her business was called Lawyers' Chambers. But we decided to think about what the audience would be looking for on iTunes. Because remember, iTunes is a pretty significant search engine. I've heard from some sources that it's the third largest. I don't know if that's still true, but a lot of people are looking for content on iTunes. So her content area, her expertise was in strata law. And so we decided to go with Your Strata Property. And her URL, we built a new website for the podcast, and it is yourstrataproperty.com.au. You can check it out. By the way, if you want to check out the case studies that I mentioned earlier on, the results at the 6-week mark and the 20-month mark, I first interviewed her on episode 80 of my podcast, and then again on episode 150 at the 20-month mark. So if you want to hear from her and what results she got, you can hear for yourself. And I think I might have forgotten to mention that she was actually getting 2 leads a week when we last spoke from her podcast. 2 clients a week, 10 of them, 10 new leads, 2 new clients. Okay, so that's how you come up with a title for your show. Either use your brand name or think about keywords. Or another way, I remember Sonia Simone and I, from the founder of Copyblogger, Sonia Simone and I had a chat about this. I said to her, I think a good way to come up with a title is state a benefit that your audience is looking for, or call out your audience in the title, or do both. And, if possible, have good recall. Now, Productive Insights probably doesn't do any of those things very well. So when I launched my membership site, I decided to launch it with something that has a simple, easy recall, and we came up with getmetodone.com. And that actually turns out, by coincidence, it was something that one of my members thought of, because she said, I just got her to done. So I thought that was a pretty cool title. I looked for the URL, it was there. It's still not perfect. I mean, it doesn't say ihelpbusinessesgrow.com, but It's just simple, you know. So that's a bit of a guide. So think about a title and put that down on your piece of paper. Don't feel, no one's going to see this is just for you, so just put something down, and if you have any questions, just reach out to me, but try and get some of those creative juices happening for your title. Create an iTunes summary, step 4, intro and outro. Now, on that handout, you have got an example intro and an example outro. This doesn't have to be super complicated. You just need to tell your listeners a little bit about what your podcast is about, what results they can expect to get from your podcast, and maybe some other things that they might be interested in. Now, the iTunes summary is fairly similar, which is why I haven't given you an example. The iTunes summary, by the way, is the thing that just goes under your artwork, which is partially hidden by that title, but it's that thing that's circled on the screen. Your intro and your outro is the bit that you have a voiceover artist speak of, like narrate, I'm sorry, and they basically introduce you to the show. You know, the bit where they have music and all that sort of jazz. The next step is, and now we're going, this part you don't have to write anything down, but you create podcast artwork that meets iTunes requirements. So the recommended artwork now is between 3,000 and 3,000 pixels max, so a square piece of artwork, like a square image. And the lowest resolution acceptable is 1400 by 1400 pixels. Apple loves design, and so they like beautiful, striking artwork. But I've gone with something fairly simple. Just make sure that whatever's written on your artwork is easy to read on a mobile screen. So you want to try and make it stand out a bit. I think mine does. Mine needs a little bit of work. Buy and set up your hardware and software. Try and do this in advance if you can, because as in order the hardware in advance if you can, because by the time you're ready to launch, you can, you're ready to go and you have the momentum. Record your first 3 episodes, upload them to your media host. In my case, it's Amazon S3. Your media host is where you actually literally host your MP3 files or whatever format you have your audio recordings on. And then you get a link from that media host, in my case Amazon S3, and I paste that link into a certain part of the blog post on my WordPress site, and you have that ready to go. So you have first 3 episodes created on your blog with the media links there as under each of the blogs, and then you submit your RSS feed to iTunes. Hopefully very soon you get an approval from iTunes, and then you celebrate because you've done a lot of work to get here. And I hope that there's a lot of people going to be celebrating very, very soon. Maybe we'll celebrate together. Celebrate your launch. Tell your friends about your launch. Tell your family about your launch. Maybe your mum will listen like mine. Just kidding. Make as many people aware of your launch as possible, because while iTunes algorithms seem to be a bit of a black box, one thing that does seem to be getting traction with iTunes is a fair amount of reviews and downloads in a short space of time. So velocity and momentum, name of the game. Step 10, create standard operating procedures and frameworks for guest outreach and content editing and repurposing. This is not within the scope of this session, but I'll give you a quick tip, and I learned this from the guy in the other room, James Schramko. 5 ways to create good quality content. Why is subject matter valuable to target audience? That's the first way you approach it, the first question you ask. The second question to answer is, what does this subject matter mean? You go a bit deeper into the subject matter. How does our listener go about implementing the subject matter to get X result? What are the biggest challenges to implementing this subject matter or implementing these ideas? And 5, what are the biggest action steps they can take right now to get quick wins? And finally, step number 11, use batching to avoid being on the content hamster wheel. We're just starting to introduce this into the business. The basic thing is, if you're producing content every week or every month, it feels like you're on a treadmill. You know, you just finished an episode, you just published an episode, and now you've got to start the whole process of the next one. But if you do 6 at a time, and you do it functionally, so you do your brainstorming, your idea creation, your Google research, your recording, your editing for 6 episodes at a time, then you don't feel like you're continuously running. You do sprints and then you get breaks, and it gives you a chance to do other stuff. A few words of warning, and then we'll go into Q&A. Podcast launches can be very painful. You're going to pay with either time or money. If you have the money, use your money. If you have the time, if you don't have the money, you'll pay for it with time. But either way, it will take up some of your resources. If you are doing it yourself, so I highly recommend outsourcing it. But if you can't outsource it, then I highly recommend getting a mentor. So, do we have time for Q&A? We've got 5 minutes. Anyone got a question? We've got one back there.
Do you have any advice for people who might be experts in their field but aren't necessarily confident in how their presentation might come across in a podcast?
I was one of those experts. And for the record, I had a podcast sitting on my computer for a year and a half, and that happened to be with a guy called Neil Patel. I had an interview with him, and I never published it because I thought, why would anyone want to hear what I have to say? It's 181 episodes later, and it's going great. So I know this is not probably what you want to hear, but just make a start. And if you're not comfortable making a start, try and find someone who will hold you accountable. A bit like a personal trainer when you go to work out, you know. You tend to get better results when you hire a personal trainer, not because they're doing anything that you wouldn't do anyway. It's because you're investing in the process, and you have to be somewhere because you made a commitment to be at the gym at a certain time. Does that help? By the way, I forgot to mention this. My number and my email address are on those sheets on both sides. If you want to talk to me or have any questions, I'm here for you for the whole 3 days and even beyond. So just SMS me. Don't call me because I get pitched all the time. I tend not to answer calls from numbers I don't recognize. But SMS me, tell me you want to meet me outside, and I really want to help, so I'll be there. We'll tic-tac-toe and we'll organize a time to meet out near the cafe. Yes?
So at what point do you feel that it's not too sleazy or not too pushy to be pushing the product or pushing the service in the podcast?
Great question. Look, different people have different thresholds around the whole sleazy thing, but my view is I don't have the right to make a pitch until I have earned the right to make the pitch, and that means I have delivered some kind of value, some kind of transformation. What I'm finding, and I'm learning this myself, but I started off not knowing any better, so I would try and say, hey, would you like to join my membership, you know? But now what I try and do is I ask myself, do I really want this person to join my membership? And often, I mean, I'm not sort of filtering them, but I'm just thinking about how I can give them value. And if I can't give them value, then I'm not going to give them value inside the membership anyway. But often what, ironically enough, happens is if I try and help people and I get them some kind of result, they ask me about what I'm doing. They ask me about how they can work with me. So I don't have to ever sell. And that's the ideal situation you want to be in. And again, it comes back to delivering a result, a transformation. And that doesn't have to be through a paid product. If you can deliver a result, that is a great thing. Any other questions? Just someone up here.
Thank you. Is it very difficult to do, say, Facebook Live and record the audio for podcasts?
Absolutely not. In fact, about 2 hours ago, I did a Facebook Live out the front with Molly Pittman, and I'm probably going to strip out the audio and publish it on my podcast. Absolutely. This is one of the lovely things about podcasting. I'm probably going to repurpose parts of this conversation and publish the audio version of my podcast. And I'll probably, I may use parts of it inside my membership program, which I only release to the members. Does that help? Another question there.
Sorry, bombarding you with questions.
No, please. I'm enjoying them.
I'm actually, we've actually recorded 3 podcasts already.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And we were doing them, my idea of trying to get the most out of it is we're recording them as video and we're going to put them on YouTube and also repurpose them as podcasts and possibly videos
Yep.
on Facebook, every possible way that we can get
Yep.
our hands on them. But I'm wondering if you think this is a good idea, because what we're doing is, myself and my husband, we've been in business for ages and ages, so we're telling stories and we're recapping with the lessons learned from those business stories.
Beautiful.
Do you feel that could be attractive to the
Absolutely.
right kind
And what sort of results are you getting from?
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't done it yet.
No,
Look,
we've recorded the
I-
3 and they're being edited at the moment.
Okay.
So we're right in the thick of it right now.
Look, I believe stories are hardwired into us. I believe in evolution, and we survived as a species over generations because of stories. Our ancestors told the others where the watering holes were and how to avoid the woolly mammoth over there, and that's how we survived. So stories are essential to our development and our survival, even today. And absolutely repurpose the content. For example, I might have a piece of video content, provided I have permission from my guest. I'll publish that only inside my membership, and it's exclusive to the members, but then the podcast audio gets published to the public on my podcast, just the audio version. Does that answer your question? Got another one at the back. We're running out of time.
Yeah, we've got time for maybe 1, possibly 2 more.
You can ask me questions out the back. I'll be there right now after this, so feel free to reach out.
Well, it's probably a relevant question for everyone anyway. So
Sure.
there's so many facets to doing a podcast, right? So
Yeah.
what about the piece of just getting people on the podcast, right? So do you get a VA running who's constantly out setting up podcasts? So let's say you're doing a once a week. How much time and what strategies to get people on to interview?
Look, that's a good question. And initially that is difficult. I was fortunate because, by the way, another way to reach out to influencers is go to events like this and meet them and shake hands with them and ask them if they'll be guests. That makes a big difference. So that will help you to solve that problem to some extent. But the other way to solve that is to do a lot more solo episodes, at least initially. But make sure you're creating content that resonates and delivers results. So whether you have a guest or not is not so much the point, in my view. I think the view is what will deliver a transformation to your listener, and that can be through a solo episode. That said, once you start getting a few big names as guests on your show, the others will want to be on your show because they're conspicuously absent if they're not. So I guess my answer to you would be twofold. One, get comfortable with creating your own content using that 5-step approach I mentioned earlier, the what, why, how, what if, the challenges and action steps. And the other one would be maybe start off only monthly, make sure you can honor that and commit to that and deliver on that, and then maybe increase the frequency if you can do it. Does that help?
That's a start, thank you. Yeah.
What else were you looking for?
Just really conscious. I mean, if you want to get someone every week, you're going to be inviting 10 people. So you're chasing 10 people a week. So it's like one head count, 1 day a week, just to get people on your podcast. Just trying to get a sense of the true time cost.
So you want to have
doing a podcast.
you want to have an exclusively interview-based podcast?
I think I would hybrid a little bit, primarily guest, yes.
Well, then I would say don't start off weekly, start off monthly. That's the best I can tell you. I can't think of any way to... Yeah, I mean, yes, you can use VAs, you can use LinkedIn. It all depends on your pitch, because 100%, or maybe 95% of the people I ask to be on my podcast say yes. So I'm not spending time asking 10 people and getting one person to agree. I don't normally ask someone if I don't think they're going to agree anyway, and they almost always say yes.
Thanks.
So to answer your question, it really comes down to whether you really understand the person you're trying to get to be a guest on your show, and you're making a very compelling offer. You need to understand them to do that.
I'm afraid that's all that we've got time for. Can I ask everyone to thank Ash for sharing his learning with us?
Thank you very much.
Just a reminder, Ash's information is on the bottom of those handouts, so feel free to reach out to him.
Thanks, guys.
Now, the